Chomsky needs absolutely no introduction. Noam Chomsky, thank you so much for joining us on TYT.
Very glad to be with you.
I want to get right to the topics that I've been dying to ask you about, and I don't want to waste any time. Starting with what happened last night with the State of the Union address. There was one moment at the very end where House Speaker Nancy Pelosi took Donald Trump's speech and she ripped it up, knowing full well that she would be on camera and that it would get quite a bit of media attention. It certainly did get a bit of media attention, and she is being applauded as, part of the resistance to Donald Trump. However, critics such as myself have been dragged through the mud because of the fact that I've criticized Pelosi for doing that, not because I have any type of love or admiration for Donald Trump, but because I see that as political theater that stands as a substitute for real resistance or political activism to represent the people. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, though.
I didn't watch it, so I've only read the reports, but I basically agree with you. I think there are much more significant ways of responding than tearing something up.
Why is it that when it comes to true political activism that represents the working people of this country, be it Occupy Wall Street or any type of political uprising, that tends to get a very different reaction in the media? But when it comes to symbolic gestures like ripping up a speech or maybe clapping in a sarcastic manner during the State of the Union, that gets much more positive reaction from the press. And I know that this is all really part of what you have written about extensively, manufacturing consent. But is this something that do you think Americans are waking up to it, or is this something that's really going to keep people complacent?
I think it's split. Some wake up to it, some accept it. It's understandable that substantive issues are evaded. They're rather toxic. So, for example, if you bring up the things that were not discussed in the most important aspect of the speech is, as often is the case, what was not discussed. So, for example, there was nothing in the speech about how Donald Trump is leading the world towards destruction of the possibilities for organized human life in the near future by his disgraceful and destructive climate policies. There was nothing in the speech about how he's tearing the last shreds of the arms control regime to shreds, causing great dangers to the world and ourselves and other things. But the media aren't going to focus on that because those cut, if you pursue those issues, they cut right to the heart of the nature of our institutions and lead to serious challenges of those institutions and calls to significantly change them. That's not something the media want to go into. It's much easier to divert attention to whether it's right or wrong to tear up a couple of pieces of paper on television.
One of the harsh realizations that I've come to, and I'm embarrassed to say this was recent, is that the media and journalism doesn't really carry out what I was taught it was supposed to carry out. It's not a check on power in the United States. In fact, I see media at this point as an extension of political campaigns or specific political parties. And that is, of course, something that you do write about extensively and you talk about extensively in Manufacturing Consent. But my question to you is, do journalists know, are they doing this with these nefarious intentions? Or is this something that's being done unwittingly? Are they being chosen in these positions at various media outlets because of the fact that they already have a certain type of ideology? Or do they know, are they aware that they're engaging in nefarious actions?
I suppose journalists who understand exactly what the constraints are, how they have to shape what they're doing, how they can sometimes sneak something in, maybe in the last paragraph of a long story that will lead people to a different direction. But I suspect for most it's just something that Orwell described. Ancient Animal Farm, which not too many people have read because it wasn't published, it was withheld, came out later. He points out that in free societies generally, unpopular ideas can be suppressed without the use of force. And one of the mechanisms, he says, is just deep immersion into the dominant culture. You have a good education, with the right schools, you just have it built into you that there are certain things it wouldn't do to say. So, for example, if you're a journalist assigned writing about, say, what happened a couple of days ago, a huge new discovery of oil, petroleum reserve off the coast of South America, Guyana, huge bonanza for ExxonMobil. Your task is to write about that and what a bonanza and how there are other fields nearby which will maximize radically increase the use of fossil fuels. Our job is not to point out that these discoveries accelerate the risk for the human species and numerous others, and that this is following from a fundamental institutional capitalist quasi-market system. You're supposed to make profit. So ExxonMobil is doing its job. Let's find more ways to destroy human life in order to fill overstuffed pockets with more dollars. That's the institutional imperative, right? That. In fact, you're not supposed to think it. You're supposed to keep to what's called objectivity. To the framework as it's presented to you by institutional power structures. Now, is that you can ask the individual who will report deal with the situation, but that's a very common standard.
Professor Chomsky, I wanted to get your thoughts on the impeachment investigation. Today, the Senate will vote to inevitably acquit Donald Trump. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on whether this was an effort that was worth pursuing for the Democrats.
It was completely obvious from the beginning that the impeachment proceedings would be a significant gift to Donald Trump, which is exactly the way they turned out. And from the first moment, it was plain that this is total farce. I'm sure you watched the performance where Chief Justice John Roberts tried to keep a straight face while he was swearing in the senators, each of whom pledged that no partisan issue would possibly influence their judgment and behavior. And of course, as everyone knew would happen, they immediately proceeded to violate the oath by acting completely along partisan lines. The main issue that the impeachment focused on was whether Donald Trump had used presidential powers in an illegal way to undermine a leading figure in the Democratic Party. Okay, that's wrong. But is that the worst crime you can think of Donald Trump having committed? In fact, it's rather reminiscent of Watergate. What was Richard Nixon's crime? There were efforts by Robert Greene and a couple of other senators to introduce Nixon's major crimes, and they were huge, into like the bombing of Cambodia, into the impeachment proceedings, but they were knocked out. And the only thing that was left was that Nixon had a bunch of thugs break into the Democratic Party headquarters. What does this suggest? It suggests, I'll leave it to you to figure it out, but what it does indicate is that the major issues were off the agenda. It was obvious from the start that the Republicans, who are completely in Trump's pocket, would vote to acquit no matter what the facts are, and that he would then triumphantly declare victory. So it's a gift to Donald Trump and a farcical proceeding which can't possibly be taken seriously. Now, why the Democrats decided to do that, I have no idea. The outcome, how it would turn out, was never seriously in doubt.
Well, you just touched on something that's been incredibly frustrating for anyone who's been paying close attention to this impeachment investigation, hoping that it would be something that would maybe point to Donald Trump's possible financial ties or financial crimes along with foreign governments or his war crimes. Those were issues that weren't brought up. And so while one can only speculate as to why, I want to share my speculation with you and get your thoughts because, and again, this is something that I think a lot of progressives in the media get criticized for pointing out. I don't believe that there's a significant difference between the corporate Republicans or the corporate Democrats. I think that when it comes to war crimes, when it comes to possible financial crimes, when it comes to corruption, when it comes to undermining our democratic process, both corporate Democrats and Republicans are very much in agreement. Do you think that that's the possibility behind why Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats decided to not bring up Donald Trump's possible financial crimes?
Well, personally, I don't doubt that Donald Trump has committed many personal financial crimes, but that is so low on the ranking of his crimes that I don't really think it matters. But let's take a close look at it. Here is a man who has torn to shreds the major international treaties. The Paris negotiations are very weak, but at least there's something. At least other countries are trying to do something, sometimes not insignificant, sometimes just hand-waving, to try to deal with a crisis that is going to destroy organized human life within a few generations. It's not a minor fact.
Right.
There's the threat of nuclear war is very serious. One of the things that's constrained it is that there have been arms control agreements, like, for example, the Reagan-Gorbachev INF treaty, which eliminated short-range nuclear weapons in Europe, which are extremely destabilizing. Okay, Trump tore it up. And not only that, brazenly, right after dismantling the treaty last August, immediately launched a test of a missile which violates the treaty, just to plead with the Russians, please develop weapons to destroy us.